Hey guys, it's Dan from worldofmrgrey, Dandalf the Grey. How are we all today? Different kind of video this time. It's going to be probably a short one, but it'll be an interesting one if you don't know the story. Last weekend, I watched The Lighthouse, the 2018 film with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. Now, I put off watching it for some unknown reason. I don't know why, because it was made by the same creators as The Witch, which I did enjoy. I didn't find it that scary, but I did enjoy it. It was a bloody weirdly wonderful film. I loved it. Out of curiosity, I thought, right, I finally want to sit down and watch The Lighthouse. I loved it. I absolutely bloody loved it. I got a bit obsessed with it.
Hark! Hark! Triton, hark! Bellow bid our fathers the sea king from the death's full foul. In his fury, black waves teeming with salt foam to smother this young mouth with pungent slime, to choke ye, gorging on your organs till you turn blue and bloated with bilge and brine and can scream no more, only when he, crowned in cockle shells with slithering tentacle tail and seeming beard, for the harpies and the soul of the dead sailors to peck and claw and feed, only to be lapped up and swallowed by the infinite waters of the dread emperor himself.
For those who haven't seen the film, you probably have no idea what that was just about. But let's just say, I really enjoyed that film. After the film, I looked it up and I found out. Now, I didn't know this. I found out that it is inspired, not based. It's inspired by an actual true event. Now, obviously, if you've seen The Lighthouse, the film, a lot of the stuff that goes on in there is not true. But it's inspired by true events. So I'm going to go through a quick brief history of what those events were, and the dark, decrepit and depressing stuff that happened. Now, the same thing with this. I have written notes because there's a lot to go over, but I've done my research, which I'm going to put the sources down below in the description. If you want to go read the full story, go ahead. The Lighthouse is loosely based on the Smalls Lighthouse, just off the coast of Pembrokeshire. First erected in 1775, it stood on wooden stilts, about 32 kilometres off the coast of Pembrokeshire. And obviously the stilts were there so the waters and the crashing waves could just glide under the lighthouse. That was the idea of the time anyway. It's since been replaced by another more sturdy structure back in 1861, which is still there to this day. At the time, back in 1801, out of the 12 or 13 lighthouses that stood around Wales, the Smalls Lighthouse was the most remote and isolated lighthouse in Wales. In 1801, there was two lighthouse keepers looking after the lighthouse, Thomas Howell and Thomas Griffiths. Back then, they only had shifts of 2 people at a time, and they'd sometimes be out there for like 3 to 4 weeks at a time before a new shift came along and relieved them of their duties. But they would just basically, they would look after the lighthouse. They'd make sure the oil lamps are constantly lit for the ships sailing by, and they would, do other duties there as well. Just maintain the little tiny island. It wasn't even an island. It was like a small rock, but it was, it was the most isolated rock in the whole of Wales. In 1801, just after a few weeks into their shift, Thomas Griffiths, after a small illness or freak accident, consensus being that they weren't sure exactly how, died from either injuries sustained after the supposed accident or an illness. I bet you're thinking, well, that's all sad and all that, but the next shift is probably coming. It was public knowledge that Howells and Griffiths hated each other. They would have public spats, proper, quarrels in public in front of other people on the mainland. It was well known that they did not like each other at all. So when Griffiths died, Howells was in a bit of a pickle. Couldn't throw Griffiths' body overboard because obviously when the new shift came along, it would look like he had done him in. So the first thing he decided to do was to keep Griffiths' body in the living quarters alongside him, hoping obviously for the next shift to come eventually. But obviously they didn't come, and his body started to decompose. So after a few days of not being able to put up with the smell and the stench of the decomposing body, Howells decided to make a small coffin using the wood in his living quarters. The living quarters they were in, they weren't very big. It was only a couple of feet squared, weren't very big at all. And he would put Griffiths' body in the coffin and tie it to the railings outside. But unfortunately, because of where he tied it, you could see the coffin from the window he would sit by. One of the few windows that were in the lighthouse, apart from at the top of the lighthouse. Within days of Howells doing this and putting Griffiths' body outside, a storm came. and it was a really bad storm. It was so much so there was gale force winds, there was hard rain, for days on end. Eventually, it broke the coffin. The coffin wasn't put together very well, so it completely destroyed the coffin, but the corpse of Griffiths was still tied to the railings outside. At one point, the wind was so strong it dislodged the arm of the corpse tied outside. So over the next few nights, Howells would sit in his quarters at night after because he still tended to the lighthouse. He still did his duties around the lighthouse area, but after tending to the light at night, he would go down into his living quarters for a bit of rest. Every time he looked out the window, he would see the arm of the corpse waving back to him, especially if it's a windy night. Now you can only imagine what that would do to you, alone 20 miles off the coast of any mainland and with no rescue in sight. Eventually, a couple of weeks went by and he realized that no rescue was coming. The new shift weren't coming simply because storms had been raging for almost a month, so no ships would be able to land at the lighthouse, but he would keep seeing ships sailing by. And the likelihood is that the ships would see the lighthouse still working at night in the foggy mist and thinking everything's okay. Apparently, the story goes that some of the ships that went by, they would look at the lighthouse at night, or on a foggy, misty day, and they could see the light circling, but at the same time, they could see someone waving back at them. Now, some say that it was either Howells trying to get their attention because obviously he's been alone on there for almost a month, or it was the corpse of Griffiths waving in the wind or beckoning to come forward to the lighthouse. We'll never know if that's true or not. Howells, having spent almost 4 months, it was 4 months until a ship could finally get to land at the lighthouse. Howells had been seeing ships sailing by almost every couple of days. For 4 months he was on that island all alone with nothing but the corpse of his former colleague waving back at him at night through the misty fog through his window. When the storms finally died down, like I said, he'd been on there for 4 months, a new shift was finally able to land at the lighthouse. And the story is when they picked up Thomas Howells, who'd been alone all that time, he'd gone a bit mad. This was the day he was gone a bit mad. His hair had turned white, and friends and families said that they didn't recognize him. He was a shell of his former self, and he didn't exactly live a good life afterwards. Nothing came from prosecution of the law, due to the Thomas Griffiths dying. Thomas Griffiths had a burial on the mainland after being picked up, but the story is that Thomas Howells never recovered from spending all those months alone on the island with nothing but a corpse waving at him from time to time. The Smalls Lighthouse incident in 1801, once over, sparked a new law where they were no longer having teams of 2 take shifts at the lighthouses. This was all over the UK. It might have been in America as well, I'm not sure. But all over the UK, there was a law brought in after this incident that 3 men had to man the lighthouse, so that if one should perish in any way, or shape or form, they wouldn't just leave another man to suffer the same fate as Thomas Howell. And that is the story of the 2 Welshmen stranded on the Smalls Lighthouse and one who went insane. But anyway, I know that was a short video. I loved that story when I found that out. I didn't know about that. I've always heard stories of lighthouse keepers, being stranded, but this particular one, like I said, is a bit closer to home for me. And once I saw the film The Lighthouse, which was bloody amazing. If you haven't watched it, Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, it's some of their best work, if you ask me. It's absolutely bloody fantastic. But once I found out about that story, I thought, that's interesting. I looked deeper into it. Unfortunately, some of the information about the Thomas Howells and Thomas Griffiths before the incident is not very well known. It's not much documented about that. But I thought it was a really interesting story, and I hope you were at least interested in the story, even though I had that little weird scene at the beginning. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed that. And there's a little history about the trials and tribulations of looking after lighthouses in the old days. It wasn't fun. But anyway, leave a like if you like this video, leave a sub if you're new to my channel. I do these quite often. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be back again sometime soon. Don't know when, don't know how. But anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.